welcome to Pixel Life Gaming. In this video we will be looking at the Tiger Ace campaign featured in the video game Company of Heroes Tales of Valor. We will be analysing each mission of the campaign, searching for any historically accurate or inaccurate content. We will then compare these elements with any real world scenarios and situations to highlight the key areas within the game that demonstrate a level of historical accuracy. But before we begin, let's have a quick overview of the campaign that will be featured in this video. During this campaign, in Company of Heroes Tales of Valor, we follow the story of Maximilian Voss, a German tank commander during the Second World War, and his crew as they take part in the fighting for Normandy during the Allied invasion in their Tiger I heavy tank. All three missions within the game focus on the battles for the French village of Valor. The first mission depicts Voss and his crew ambushing a British armoured column as they attempt to advance through the village before driving into Valor to destroy the remaining British forces there. During this attack, their tank is immobilised by a British anti-tank gun, forcing them to abandon the tank. The second mission follows the crew as they attempt to flee the war-torn village on foot, evading the remaining enemy units as they do so. The third and final mission of the campaign sees the crew returning to the village with a pair of new Tiger tanks as they attempt to push the British out of Valor one last time. During all these missions, the player must control very few units, using a single tank during the first mission, 2 squads of infantry for the second, and a pair of tanks while being supported by AI infantry for the final battle. Now we've had an overview of the campaign, let's begin looking at the historically accurate content and compare it to the real-world events of World War II. Possibly the most obvious historical element of the campaign is the fact that it portrays the real-life exploits of an actual German tank commander of the Second World War. That tank commander was one SS Hauptsturmführer Michael Wittmann. He began his career in 1934 when he was drafted into the army. In 1937 he volunteered to join the elite unit Leibstandarte SS Adolf Hitler. At the start of the Second World War he was in command of an armoured car during the fighting for Poland and France. During Operation Barbarossa, now in command of a Sturmgeschütz or Stug 3 assault gun, he began to make a name for himself with several major victories, the first of which included his lone assault gun and its crew coming under attack from 8 Soviet tanks. He managed to destroy 6 of them during this engagement. Wittmann later went on to graduate from SS Junkerschule or the SS Officer Cadet School as an SS Untersturmführer in December 1942. Shortly after, in early 1943, he first received command of a Tiger I heavy tank. Later that same year, he took part in the fighting in the southern sector of the Battle of Kursk during Operation Citadel, heavily involved in the fighting around the town of Prokhorovka. While he is probably the best known and most decorated tank commander of the Third Reich, he is possibly best known to the Western Allies for his actions during the invasion of Normandy campaign in June 1944. One of these actions involved single-handedly attacking and destroying a British armoured convoy at the village of Valor with his crew and their single Tiger tank. This real-world attack at the village is the clear inspiration of the campaign featured within the game, as it reflects almost perfectly the events of the battle within all 3 missions. The first mission focuses on the lone tank ambushing the British column before being disabled by an anti-tank gun, the same situation that occurred for Wittmann and his crew, before escaping the village in the second mission. The third mission, while also depicting the true story of them returning to the village with reinforcements, is not as accurately portrayed as the 2 previous missions. This is because the second attack on the British forces in the village was not as successful, as the British had set up an ambush for the German armour should they attempt to capture the town once again. Michael Wittmann and his crew returned with a new Tiger tank, another Tiger I and 2 Panzer IV tanks. During the initial attack on the 13th of June 1944, it is reported that, with their lone Tiger, they managed to destroy a total of 13 tanks, 2 anti-tank guns and 15 troop carriers of the British 22nd Armoured Brigade. While this style of battle may seem like an extremely rare occurrence to many, with this instance possibly being the only situation that some may know of, there were numerous other times during World War II when this sort of lone tank battle occurred. Wittmann himself used this style of attack multiple times against enemy armoured convoys on the Eastern Front, but another such situation occurred on the 8th of August 1944 when SS Untersturmführer Wilhelm Fay, also known as Willie Fay, ambushed a column of 15 British Sherman tanks with his single Tiger. He managed to destroy a total of 14 of them. Although Whitman's ambush at Villers-Bocage is clearly the inspiration for the campaign within the game, there are also several other more subtle indications to the historical values and accuracies within the title. One of these appears during the opening cutscene of the first mission for the campaign. The opening of this cutscene takes place in the northern sector on the Eastern Front in September 1942 around the city of Leningrad. While this may not seem relevant at first, it is a subtle nod to the battlefield debut of the Tiger I tank, which were first issued to the 1st Company of the 502nd Schwerpanzerabteilung, or Heavy Tank Battalion, in August 1942. Shortly after, this unit went into combat operations with Army Group North in the Leningrad sector. This is not the only element of the campaign that hints at another historical aspect. During the final cutscene of the campaign, we hear the voice of the tank commander in the game, Maximilian Voss, explaining that on the 9th of August, the tank's gunner, Schultz, is killed while attempting to delay the Allied advance in Normandy. While this may seem insignificant at first, his gunner's death is an indirect reference to the true life of Michael Whitman, who was killed the day before on the 8th of August whilst leading a counterattack against the British and Canadian forces during the fighting for the Falaise Pocket. Another subtle, historically accurate element of the game is the inclusion of mechanical issues from the German Tiger I heavy tank, which were initially encountered when the tank first entered service. These mechanical problems limited the tank's initial frontline capabilities, but further into the conflict, these problems were eventually overcome to some extent. Within the game, these mechanical issues are referenced within both the cutscenes and the gameplay itself, with several scripted moments within the first mission that have the player's vehicle break down and begin repairing itself automatically. The repair system in the game of these campaign missions utilises the idea that the crew of the vehicles themselves would sometimes be required to perform maintenance checks and minor repairs where needed. While there are all these accuracies featured within the game, there are several minor inaccuracies, the greatest of which is probably the interactions between units in the campaign gameplay itself. During the initial combat of the first mission, the player's unit, a Tiger I heavy tank, is incapable of destroying enemy vehicles with a single shot of its main armament, the 88mm anti-tank gun. It is well documented that this weapon was capable of destroying any allied vehicle at that time at ranges up to 2,000 meters. This made it a massively feared weapon with the ability to destroy almost any target with a single shot. Unfortunately, this is not represented at the beginning of the mission, with the weapon only achieving such destructive power after gaining veterancy later in the mission and campaign. The only other clear inaccuracy within this campaign occurs during the opening cutscene set on the Eastern Front. In this cutscene, a tank, referred to as a T-34, is seen charging a German Tiger tank. However, the tank featured in this cutscene bears little resemblance to that of the T-34. So the question is, what tank is it? The truth is, there are multiple tanks that it may be. However, when you take a closer look at its shape and research the other potential vehicles, more problems arise. One problem is that several of these vehicles either never entered service early enough to take part in the fighting at Leningrad in 1942, were only developed to prototype stage of tank design, or never entered combat service with the Soviet Union. These potential vehicles that greatly resemble the tank from the cutscene include the T-20, M26 Pershing, T-34-85 and IS-1 or IS-85 tanks, along with the KV-1S. When it comes to the T-20 and M26 Pershing tanks, this is practically impossible due to the fact that both vehicles were developed after 1942 by the United States, with the T-20 only being completed as a prototype and the M26 entering combat service with the American military in early 1945. The M26 was also never sent to the Soviet Union as part of the Lend-Lease program between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union. As for the other vehicles, the T-34-85 and the IS-1, which were developed in the Soviet Union, neither tank entered combat service before 1943. This means that both would not have been involved in the fighting around Leningrad in 1942. The only remaining possibility is the KV-1S tank. The KV-1S, with the S standing for Skorostnoy, which translated means speedy, entered combat service in 1942, which makes it possibly the best contender for the vehicle of the opening cutscene. Although this is the case, when comparing the silhouettes of each tank with that in the cutscene, it would appear that the tank which best resembles that in the game is the experimental T-20, developed by the United States and which never entered combat service with any nation during the conflict. This is mainly due to the shape of the turret featured on the tank in the cutscene. The similarities are only enhanced further when viewing images of the same tank from different angles, revealing that even the shape of the hull front bears a great resemblance to the unidentified vehicle. Unfortunately, this adds a great sense of inaccuracy to this element of the cutscene, which is only enhanced further when noticing that the correct image of a T-34 of that period in the war is also present. This only adds greater confusion as it shows that the correct appearance of a T-34 was used in the cutscene and could have been utilised for the other tank that featured within. Even though there are these inaccuracies present in this campaign, overall the depiction of an actual battle that occurred during the Second World War based on the true life events of a German tank commander and the inclusion of other more subtle historical content, this campaign can easily be described as being a highly accurate depiction of several tank battles and the type of combat scenarios that occurred during the Second World War. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed everything that was discussed, and if you did, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe, or check out some other playlists and videos on our channel. Until the next time, goodbye.